If you are new to this series, we have been going through every single national title claim in college football history for the FBS or highest level at the time it was claimed. At this time, we have covered all the teams that have claimed 5 titles or less and are moving on to the higher numbers. Please go back and watch those for me after this if you enjoy this sort of thing. Prior to the college football playoffs and BCS national title game, we relied only on the polls to determine the college football national champion, with some formulas and short-lived systems in between attempting to better things. The polling system failed many times, with as many as 4 to 6 teams in contention that never even played each other. This often resulted in many split national championship years. Prior to 1965, some polls voted on their national champions before the bowl games were even played, and then saw their champion lose their final game. If you go back a little further, the first attempt to straighten things out came in 1936 with the creation of the AP poll, and was often the most respected poll for many years. But even then, the early media had their biases and favorites due to what they were familiar with. If all the writers and voters only saw Notre Dame or Yale, they would have no way to compare it to what was going on down south or out west, and usually just sided with what they knew. Prior to the AP, we had a wild, lawless 67 years of college football where many or no teams called themselves national champions, and a lot of those teams didn't even claim national titles in this era until more modern polls went back and retroactively named them national champions. While the AP poll is often the benchmark for a champion from 1936 to 1998, I would still argue that point. If the AP named you champion and nobody else did, that smells a bit fishy. Personally, I tend to side with what a majority of the polls say. So if the AP says you are the champ, but 11 others don't, I look deeper into the situation. And that's just me. You are free to do or think whatever you like.
Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
And of course, I view any titles won through the playoffs or BCS title game as automatically 100% legit from the start of the video, even if you disagree with the selection committee. And yes, I have also disagreed with them plenty of times. On the flip side, any that claim a separate title outside of those official parameters I view as complete bullshit, whether the selection committee screwed said team or not. History is history, and I respect that fact, even if I dislike that fact. For the purposes of this channel, I'm only going by what the school actually claims. I will do a series covering unclaimed titles later on. I have added a layer to my tiers and now broken them down into 5 sections. 100% legit, debatable but fair, I see your argument but no, complete bullshit, and introducing 1941 Alabama, which will be reserved for the most imaginary or dumb claims that exist. The University of Pennsylvania, another Ivy making an appearance as we dive into the 7 claimed schools. The school was home to John Heisman and Chuck Bednarik, 2 people that have very prestigious awards named after them. But this is not a video about individual success, in this series at least. You know what? I don't have too much to say in this intro of much interest. No offense to them, but it's just Penn, and is, in my opinion, one of the more boring teams even within the Ivy League, and probably why I'm starting with them to kick off the 7s in the first place. They are historically relevant, absolutely, just not fun on the surface, but we will see. All 7 of these claims are over 100 years old. I apologize in advance if I cannot find many video clips, or if I happen to use some that are not exactly of the year I am speaking of at the time. But come on, if you clicked on this, you're probably already a fan of the series. Let's enjoy the ride as best we can. Our first claim takes us to 1894. Yep, you heard that correctly. It is only the 25th season of college football, and it is the first season for programs such as Arkansas, Oregon, and Texas A&M. And before we begin any of these, I will remind people that we are in very, very early territory here. If a team plays a high school or YMCA or anything less than a college, I am not going to discount that immediately. Those types of institutions were also new to the game and in some cases just as talented. It just depended on how organized, well-trained, and the strategies used. It was also difficult to find teams to play in your area and expensive to leave it for some teams. So, you beat a high school in this era. I'm cautious but good with it, unless it is the only deciding factor in a debate between 3 or more teams. Anyways, The Quakers of 1894 beat everyone on the schedule, including 9 shutouts. In total, the team beat their opponents by a combined score of 366-20 to finish a perfect 12-0. And a reminder, no official polls would be invented for another decade after their final claim. So, we're just using our best judgment here. So, I know what you're thinking off the bat. How can any team that was undefeated with 9 shutouts not be 100%? Well, it was common for several of the better teams to achieve this, so let's see what we've got. First off, Penn claims this one off Park H. Davis naming them co-national champion. Davis at this point has become a running joke on this channel, not exactly because he was completely dumb, but more because of his indecisiveness and tendency to favor his teams, such as the ones he coached, and would often throw a team in there that no other selector did just to be difficult. He picked co-champions 28 times in the 64 years he made picks, and these sometimes included 3 teams. Enough about him. The debate of an undefeated team seems weird, I know, but in 1894 there were 13 of them. Granted, 2 of those had a tie, but were still in the double digits. But let's not worry about how legit they all are, as only Yale and Princeton claim this title also. I've not yet covered either team, as they both claim the most in history and will thus make them the final 2 in this series. But I will say, out of the 2, Princeton was 8-2 and lost to Penn. Tigers, get the hell out of this conversation, and I'll berate you more in your own video. Yale, on the other hand, was 16-0, a record that stood until it was matched by North Dakota State in 2019 and then Indiana in 2025. For what it's worth, Yale shut out 13 of those opponents, with 5 being athletic clubs. So, from here we go back to what I said before. Just because they were clubs does not automatically mean they were inferior. But we are talking about Yale here. They were the 3rd ever team and had a strong grasp on things with a good historical foundation already laid. Yale is fine. You can't really poke many holes in this. As for Penn, really, the same argument applies. If we look at the strongest common opponent of Princeton, Yale beat them by twice as much as Penn did. Yale is probably the better team, but in an era where everything is murky, there is nothing but speculation. On a gut feeling and a reluctant siding with the majority, I am going to call Penn debatable but fair, as Yale seems to have a slight edge to the 100% tier by themselves. Spoiler alert. Who am I kidding? You'll forget this sentence by the time I do their video. Flip the calendar once. We're going only to 1895. Since Yale got so much credit for playing so many games the previous year, Penn thought they'd add a couple more themselves. The Quakers went 14-0, shutting out the first 10 opponents. And again, for reference, around 17 teams recorded 0 losses also. Penn got a lot more respect this season as multiple selectors chose them. As for the other claim, Yale is the only other team calling themselves champions in 1895. The Bulldogs suffered a tie against the Boston Athletic Association and Brown. These 2 teams can be compared with some ease to come to a reasonable conclusion. Both played the Crescent Athletic Club. Penn won 32-0 and Yale won 8-2. Yeah, big difference. Both teams played Carlisle, and both won by shutout, with the Quakers scoring double the points. Both teams played Brown. Penn won 12-0, and Yale won 4-0, and also tied in a rematch, as I previously mentioned. If you do not accept any of those comparisons, fine. At least accept that perfect is better than twice tied. 1895 is 100% for Penn. The next claim is that of 1897. But wait, what happened in 1896, you ask, Mr. Chronicles? They lost a single game by 2 points, but hey, at least they had some dignity and didn't try to claim it. So, in 1897, Penn is again perfect at 15-0, as it was becoming clear that the media would favor you if you just played a bunch of games, regardless of who it was against. The Quakers outscored all opponents by a combined 463-20, with 12 shutouts. I should also mention that this would be the final championship claim under legendary Hall of Fame coach George Woodruff, who would go on to finish his Penn career in 1901 with an amazing 124-15-2 record. So yes, back to Penn in 1897. they won the title retroactively by a majority of selectors and mathematical formulas, and co-championed by Park H. Davis, of course. Fun fact, Park H. Davis never in his life lost a game of heads or tails. When a coin was flipped in the air, he just said, "I have heads and tails both as co-champions." Then he frolicked off into the night singing folk songs to his cats. Yale again claims this title as well, and Yale again is wrong. Nobody in the time or retroactively named them sole champions, but a couple named them co-champions. Yale went 9-0-2, tying Army and Harvard. The two had several common opponents, but the ones I'll use to make my point is first Harvard, who Penn beat, and Yale tied, and second Brown, who Penn beat 40-0, and Yale beat 18-14. Penn is alone on the mountaintop here, yet again, at 100% legit. Finally, we are in the 20th century. 1904 is the next claim from the Quakers, and again we have another impressive season. 12-0 with 11 shutouts, and for what it's worth, every opponent was an actual college team this time. Penn was named champion retroactively by 3 selectors, including that scoundrel Davis, as his sole champion, a miracle. Michigan and Minnesota also claimed this season, and both were also perfect in their own right. Now, considering that I have not yet done a video on the Gophers or Wolverines, I don't want to go into too deep of detail, but I'll give the keynotes. Minnesota posted shutouts in 12 of its 13 games and had some astronomical scores, but had a subjectively weaker schedule. Michigan was similar with 7 shutouts in 10 games with a similar schedule to Minnesota. For whatever reason, the two didn't play each other, despite being in the same conference, and both opted for high schools or a subsect of the University of Chicago's Physicians and Surgeons, in which both teams won by 107 and 72 points respectively. Basically, both of these guys ran up the score on weaker opponents to make themselves look better, allegedly at least. Penn played what is considered a much more prestigious schedule, as the East was viewed in a much more favorable way in 1904. Of the other two, only Minnesota was named sole champions by a selector. Penn seems most legit here, with the information that we have, and I will again put them at 100%. Skip ahead a few years and we find our next claim in 1907. The team started out 7-0, but then got smashed by the Carlisle Indians team 26-6 that featured emerging superstar and future legend Jim Thorpe. The Quakers would win out from there to finish 11-1. They were not named national champions or even co-national champions by anyone or any system. It is actually unclear to most where this claim even comes from, and can be assumed that it was just made up and then just accepted by the school itself. Yale was named national champion by everyone retroactively and are 1907 champions. This claim has to fit perfectly into the 1941 Alabama tier. Penn or someone near Penn just completely made this up. Only a year later, our 6th claim comes up in 1908. The Quakers again went undefeated up until the Carlisle game, and this time tied the Indians 6-6 to ultimately finish 11-0-1. The team had a majority of the selectors pick them, and nobody else claims this one. There are a few teams that have an argument that I may bring up in the future series, but as of 2026, those teams are leaving it alone. With nobody disputing the claim, 1908 Penn is 100% legit. And finally, our last claim is from 1924. The team played its first 10 games on its own home field, with their only blemish being a 0-0 tie with Penn State. When they finally left home to play at Cal, they lost 14-0 to finish the season 9-1-1. The Quakers were named national champion by none other than Park H. Davis, that rat bastard. This is considered one of his worst sole champion selections of all time, and he did so likely just because he was in Pennsylvania at the time. I don't know how this dude's brain worked. I'm sure not much thought went into this one for him, honestly. Ever heard of the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame? Yeah? Well, that team led by them also claimed this title at 10-0 by everyone else except Davis. I have spent a majority of this video mocking Davis, and while I won't completely dismiss his input at every turn, I will here. Penn did not completely make up this claim, but Park H. Davis did. By now, he had already gained a reputation for having a huge, Eastern bias, often dismissing the accomplishments of the South or the West. I'm dropping this claim all the way down to the 41 Bama tier again. 7 claims, and I accept 5 of them. I'm surprised too. But I, and most of you, probably take any 100-year-old plus title with a grain of salt. By all means, Penn, be proud of that history. Lately in this series, I've been ending with my thoughts on if I think the team in question will be adding to the trophy case anytime soon, like within the next 5 to 10 years. And I'll just repeat mostly what I said for Cornell. As with every school in that conference, the answer is going to be a resounding hell no. The Ivy League just started participating in the FCS playoffs in 2025 and do not even offer scholarships for football. And wouldn't you know it, I did an entire video on the subject. Please go check that out if you have not already. But even if a Cinderella team comes along out of the Ivy League and makes a run in the playoffs, it probably won't be Penn. The Quakers last won the conference in 2016, which is usually what it will take to make it in. Even though we had a wild situation that got Yale and Harvard in 2025, that sort of thing's gonna be rare. Since 2016, Penn has finished no higher than tied for second in the conference in 2022. While I could see them make the FCS playoffs within the next decade maybe, they will never win the national title under the current conditions. Like I said before, unless the Ivy League prioritizes winning football more, and I understand why they will not for obvious and good reasons, nobody in that league is winning the FCS title in mine or your lifetimes. And there you go. If you feel I was unfair or missed a piece of info, go ahead and make your case in the comments. Please go check out the other videos in this series. There's a playlist for them, and we are in the final stretch. And remember, this has all been just one guy on YouTube who did some research and gave an opinion. I'm sure I won't change any fan base's opinion on the titles they choose to boast about. Certain fan bases have made that pretty clear thus far. This has been College Football Chronicles, and I hope you join me next time.